Have evolutionists proved how life first happened? Hi, it's Calvin Smith here, and welcome to Creation Basics, where our goal is to make God's creation part of your everyday conversation. Now, today's question is, have evolutionists proved how first life happened? Well, what do you get when you take some methane and some ammonia and hydrogen and water and you heat it all up and you zap it with some electricity? Well, according to some people, you'd think that life itself would pop out. But this is far from true. The idea that life began in a warm, soupy pond millions of years ago was first proposed by a Russian atheist named Alexander Oprah. In his book, The Origin of Life, which was published in 1924, Oprah said that life may have evolved through random processes in a biological soup, when organic molecules went into primitive oceans, and then they were energized by forces like lightning and deep sea events and electrical discharges and so on. And he said that if the right mixture of chemicals and energy were present, life could have spontaneously generated. Now, in 1953, a man named Stanley Miller tried simulating the environment that Oprah proposed and shot some electrical discharges into a mixture of gases that he thought would have been on this ancient Earth. And his experiment resulted in some very simple building blocks of life called amino acids. Now, evolutionists were very excited and thought that the origin of life was just a few experiments away. Now, this has been presented in textbooks to support evolutionary ideas, but Miller's experiment didn't explain the origin of life any better than a lightning bolt hitting a sand pile would explain the existence of a silicon chip in a computer. Time magazine's review of Miller's experiment 31 years after said this: in 1953, University of Chicago graduate student Stanley Miller provided the first widely accepted experimental evidence. In a glass jar, he created a comic strip version of primitive Earth. Water for the ocean, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen for the atmosphere. Sparks for lightning and other forms of electrical discharge. 1 week later, he found in his jar a sticky goop of organic chemicals, including large quantities of amino acids, Lego blocks for the proteins that make up cells. Case closed, or nearly so, many scientists believed. Now this textbook picture of how life originated, so familiar to college students just a generation ago, is under serious attack. It was, says planetary scientist and White House fellow Christopher Chiba, a beautiful picture. Unfortunately, he adds, it is probably wrong. So why does the Miller experiment not show how life originated? Well, evolutionists no longer believe that Oprah's idea of what life was like on Earth was correct, and this is what Miller's experiment was based on. Secondly, Miller deliberately removed oxygen, which destroys amino acids, from his apparatus, and current geological evidence indicates that oxygen was always present on Earth. As well, one of the things that allowed Miller's experiment to work is that he designed a water trap that protected the amino acids from being destroyed. But there's no credible way for a similar protective environment to have happened naturally. And it produced amino acids, that's all. These are building blocks of proteins, specific structures in living things. That's like producing a Lego block that can be part of a Lego house or a boat or a train, for example. But everyone knows that Lego constructions don't build themselves. So the experiment did nothing to show how proteins are constructed or where the information for life comes from. By the way, amino acids also come in two forms, right and left-handed. All life forms only use the left-handed kind, but Miller's experiment produced a 50-50 mixture of left and right. When something dies, its amino acids revert back to a 50-50 mix. So Miller's experiment essentially produced a recipe for death, not life. Also, the fact that amino acids in living things are all left-handed is a clue to an intelligent designer being involved in the creation of life. For example, if you have a coin and it has two sides that can come up heads or tails, if you toss it long enough, 100 times for example, you get roughly 50-50 chance of one or the other. But if you tossed a coin 100 times and it always came up heads, you'd know that it had been rigged. Somebody had tampered with it, because that doesn't happen naturally. So the fact that amino acids in living things only occur in one way shows that someone, God, has been tinkering with the odds. So, have evolutionists proved how first life happened? No. And if it took brilliant scientists to make life, it would show that it took intelligence to create life in the first place. If you're appreciating this content, visit the answersingenesis.ca website for much more. Please consider donating to the ministry, and whatever platform you're accessing this on, it likely has some combination of features that allow you to subscribe or like or share, and we'd appreciate you taking the time to do so, because it's probably the best thing you can do to help us continue to do outreach. Until next time, I'm Cal Smith. Blessings to you.